The ballroom shimmered with light chandeliers like captured suns, glasses of champagne reflecting 100 smiles. To the guests, it was just another charity event, hosted by the mysterious Mr. Aram, a man whose fortune and grace kept the tabloids guessing. No one called him by his real title anymore, the Vampire King. At the edge of the marble floor stood his son, Damien, dressed in a black suit and holding a polished cane. His right leg trembled slightly, each step measured, deliberate. People noticed and then politely looked away. That was easier. Alina, the maid, moved quietly through the crowd with a tray of glasses. She saw everything the others ignored, the way Damien's smile faded every time someone avoided his eyes, the stiffness of his father's jaw when whispers spread. The music started, slow and elegant. Couples drifted onto the dance floor. Damien stood alone, watching the movement he'd memorized from afar, his fingers tapping the rhythm against his cane. When a waiter bumped into him, spilling a drop of wine on the marble, everyone turned, but only for a heartbeat, just long enough to make him wish they hadn't. Then Alina crossed the room, no hesitation. She set her tray aside, knelt slightly so her gaze met his, and offered her hand. "Would you lead, sir?" she asked softly. The crowd went silent. A maid asking him to dance? Even Vladis Aram lifted his head. Damien hesitated, then placed his trembling hand in hers. She didn't guide him, she followed. The first step was clumsy, the second uncertain. But the third made the chandeliers sway like they'd waited centuries for that exact moment. And somewhere among the stunned silence, the Vampire King smiled for the first time in years. Morning light spilled through the tall windows of the ballroom, washing away the glitter and music of the night before. The chandeliers hung quiet now, their crystals catching only silence. Alina moved between tables, gathering forgotten glasses and folded napkins. From the corner of her eye, she saw movement, a slim figure near the window, one hand resting on the cane, the other tracing shapes in the air as if drawing invisible steps. It was Damien. Alone again, but this time he wasn't watching others dance. He was moving slowly, clumsily, repeating the same turn over and over, his reflection swaying with him in the glass. When he noticed her, he froze, embarrassed. "You're not supposed to be here yet," he said softly. "I start early," she replied. "And so do you, it seems." He looked away. "I wanted to see if it was real, last night." "What do you mean?" "That I could still move without people staring at what's wrong with me." His voice cracked on the word wrong. Alina set the tray aside. "They didn't stare because something was wrong. They stared because something brave happened." He smiled faintly. "You really think it was brave?" "I think it was beautiful," she said. "You led the room, Damien. They just weren't ready to follow." He glanced at her, the faintest glimmer of pride in his eyes. "You didn't seem afraid to follow." "I was terrified," she admitted with a small laugh. "But you didn't let me fall." For a moment, neither spoke. The morning breeze moved the curtains, and sunlight cut a path between them. Then Damien said quietly, "No one's ever asked me to lead before." Alina smiled. "Then I guess we just started a new tradition." From the shadows of the hallway, unseen, Vladis Aram listened, his expression unreadable, but the sound of his son's laughter seemed to shake something long buried in him. That evening, the castle hotel was quieter than usual. Guests dined in the courtyard, unaware that in the upper ballroom the floor was alive again, not with music, but with the echo of soft footsteps. Damien stood in the center, his cane set aside. Alina had convinced the pianist to stay a few minutes after closing, and now gentle notes drifted through the air, a waltz slow enough for breathing, light enough to forgive mistakes. "You don't have to do this," he said. She smiled. "Neither do you, but we're here." He hesitated before taking her hand. His palm was cold, uncertain. "If I fall." "I'll fall with you," she said simply. The first step was shaky, the second smoother. Then he found the rhythm small, careful movements, his balance guided not by perfection, but by trust. The mirrors reflected them like ghosts learning to live again. Alina followed his lead, adjusting without words, her eyes never leaving his. Halfway through the song, Damien forgot to limp. The pain in his leg dulled beneath the weightlessness of motion. He spun her clumsy, joyful, and the sound that escaped him wasn't a groan or sigh, but laughter. When the last chord faded, they stopped, breathless. Alina bowed playfully. "Told you could lead." Damien looked down at his trembling hands. It felt normal, like I wasn't broken. She shook her head gently. "You were never broken. You were just waiting for the right song." Unseen behind a half-closed door, Vladis Aram watched them. The sight struck him deeper than sunlight ever could, his immortal heart remembering what pride used to feel like. For the first time in decades, he whispered to himself, "He's alive." The next morning, Vladis Aram called for Alina. His tone was formal, his words precise, too calm to be safe. The message came through another servant. "Mr. Aram wishes to speak with you in the East Study." When she entered, the curtains were drawn. The air was colder here, still scented with rain from the night before. Vladis stood by the fireplace, motionless, a glass of dark wine untouched in his hand. "You danced with my son," he said without turning. Alina nodded carefully. "Yes, sir." "Without permission." She hesitated. He didn't need it. That made him face her eyes pale, unreadable. "You don't understand what it means to expose him like that." People were talking, laughing. "I saw them," she said, "and I saw him. He wasn't afraid, he was proud." The words hung there. For a long moment the immortal looked almost human, caught between anger and something older, regret. "You think kindness can heal what time could not?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," she said, voice steady. But hiding pain never did. He studied her, the firelight flickering against his expression. "You speak as though you've lost something." "I've lost plenty," she replied, "but I never let it make me cruel." Something inside him faltered. He turned away, setting the glass down untouched. "My son was born into a world that sees weakness as shame. I wanted to protect him from it, and in doing so—" "You protected him from living," she finished softly. He closed his eyes. For a creature who had survived centuries, her words cut deeper than any blade. When Alina left the study, Vladis remained alone, staring at his own reflection in the window, realizing that the man in the glass looked more ghost than king. By the end of the week, the castle hotel was buzzing again, this time not with music, but with whispers. The story of the maid who danced with the crippled boy had spread faster than the applause ever did. Guests spoke in lowered voices. Some found it sweet, others scandalous. Alina felt their eyes wherever she went. Some pitied her, others mocked. But the worst were the ones who looked at Damien with that same quiet cruelty, as if his courage had been a trick. In the dining hall, two socialites whispered near the piano. "She made him look like a spectacle," one said. "No," the other replied with a thin smile. "She made his father look weak." Alina tightened her grip on the tray she carried, forcing herself to breathe. She glanced toward the far end of the room. Vladis Aram stood, surrounded by donors, the perfect host, unbothered on the surface. But she saw his jaw clench when someone leaned in to whisper. Later, when she went to check on Damien, she found him by the grand staircase, eyes on the floor. "They said it was a pity dance," he murmured. "It wasn't," she said firmly. "It was your dance." He shook his head. "You don't understand, Alina. To them, I'll always be a reminder of what my father failed to perfect." "Then let them choke on their perfection," she said, the words slipping out sharper than intended. "They weren't the ones brave enough to move." He looked up, startled, then smiled, small but real. "You sound like someone who's not afraid of kings." "I serve one," she said. "I don't fear him." Down the hall, unseen by either of them, Vladis heard her voice carry steady, defiant, and realized the rumor that threatened to humiliate him was slowly becoming the thing that might save his family. The gala resumed that evening, meant to restore the family's image. The chandeliers blazed brighter than before, as if light itself could erase gossip. Guests filled the ballroom again, their smiles polished, their laughter rehearsed. Damien entered beside his father, cane in hand, posture straight, despite the murmurs that followed. Alina stayed near the wall, serving drinks, trying to look invisible. But every conversation she passed ended with her name in a whisper. Then one voice rose above the rest, a woman's, loud enough to pierce the music. "There's our little heroine," she sneered, gesturing toward Alina. "Tell us, did you rehearse that dance, or was it charity?" Laughter rippled. The musicians faltered. Before Alina could speak, Damien stepped forward. His cane struck the marble once, sharp as thunder. "Enough." The crowd stilled. He turned slowly toward the woman, his voice calm but unshakable. "You think it was charity? It wasn't. She didn't pity me. She saw me before any of you did." No one dared breathe. Vladis Aram, standing a few steps behind, said nothing. He watched his son stand taller than he ever had, the tremor in his leg forgotten. Damien looked around the room, meeting every pair of startled eyes. "You measure worth by what you can hide," he said. "My father taught me that, but she taught me something better, to lead, even when the world looks away." For a heartbeat, the silence was total. Then someone began to clap. One, then two, until the hall filled with the sound of hands hesitant, then sincere. Alina's eyes met his across the crowd, pride and disbelief mixing in her smile. In the balcony above, Vladis felt something he hadn't known in a century. Tears. The kind that burned, not from grief, but from the sudden, humbling weight of love. The applause faded, but the consequences didn't. By dawn, the headlines were everywhere. "The reclusive Aram heir speaks out at charity gala. The maid and the son who defied the king." Vladis Aram read the words alone in his study, surrounded by silence. The photographs hurt more than the gossip, his son's defiant eyes, the maid's hand reaching toward him, the visible proof that the house of Aram was no longer untouchable. By noon, Alina was gone. The manager had called her into the office, eyes full of regret. "Orders from above," he said. "You're dismissed, effective immediately." She didn't argue. She packed her things, took one last look at the ballroom, and whispered to the empty air, "I'd do it again." When Damien found out, he didn't speak for hours. He just stood by the window, watching rain blur the gardens below. Then, quietly, he said to his father, "You talk about protecting me, but you only protect your name." Vladis flinched, but said nothing. "You think I'm ashamed of my leg?" Damien's voice shook. "I was ashamed of being hidden. You taught me that silence keeps us safe, but I don't want safety anymore." His father turned slowly. "You don't understand the danger." "No," Damien said. "You don't understand living." Lightning split the sky, flooding the room with white light. For an instant, Vladis saw his son not as fragile, but as free. When the storm broke, the castle trembled with thunder. In that sound, something inside the immortal king finally cracked the armor built over centuries of fear. He whispered into the empty room, as if to someone who was no longer there, "I swore I'd never lose another soul I loved." But the wind howled through the hall, answering for her, "You already did." The storm didn't end. It lingered, heavy and electric, as if the sky itself refused to forgive. The castle lost power that night. The guests had fled hours earlier, but the grand ballroom still glowed faintly under the flashes of lightning. Vladis Aram stood alone in the dark, surrounded by silence that weighed more than centuries ever had. Then a sound reached him, faint, rhythmic. Footsteps. A cane tapping marble. He turned. Damien was there, dressed in the same suit from the gala, eyes steady despite the storm's glare. "You shouldn't be up," Vladis began. "I'm tired of sitting," Damien said. He moved toward the center of the ballroom. The floor was slick with rain leaking through the broken skylight. Water shimmered like glass under each flash of light. "Where's your music?" his father asked. Damien smiled. "You don't need it when you already remember the song." Then he did something that froze the immortal where he stood. He extended his hand. "You taught me to survive, father. Now let me teach you to live." Vladis hesitated. He hadn't danced in centuries, not since a human heartbeat meant anything. But something in his son's gaze broke the weight of eternity. Slowly, he took the offered hand. The first step was awkward, unbalanced. Then Damien whispered, "Follow, not lead." And he did. The thunder became percussion, the rain their melody. They moved as equals, the immortal and the fragile, the father and the son, one learning grace, the other learning trust. When the lightning struck again, for a moment, it looked as though the two figures had merged, shadow and reflection, weakness and strength indistinguishable. Outside, the villagers who watched from afar swore they saw candlelight flickering in the ballroom, two silhouettes dancing where no music played, as if the storm itself had bowed to them. The storm had passed, leaving the castle bathed in a fragile dawn light. The ballroom smelled of wet stone and candle wax. Vladis Aram sat by the window, the weight of centuries pressing on his shoulders, and for the first time in his long existence he felt truly mortal. He had watched his son sleep at last, exhausted but peaceful, his cane resting beside the chair. The memory of that dance still pulsed through him like borrowed heartbeats. It had been clumsy, imperfect, and utterly human. When the first ray of sunlight crept through the curtains, he didn't hide from it. He let it touch his hand, even though it burned faintly. The pain was almost a relief. By afternoon, a black car left the castle gates. The driver carried no luggage, only a single envelope with Alina Moreau's name written in elegant script. She was working at a small cafe now, miles away, when the bell above the door chimed. Vladis stepped inside, dressed not as a king, but as a man. "I shouldn't be here," he said softly. "Then why are you?" she asked. He hesitated then. "To say I was wrong." Alina crossed her arms, unsure whether to believe him. "About what?" "About thinking I could protect my son by making him invisible. About punishing you for showing him he wasn't broken." Her expression softened. "You didn't punish me. You punished yourself." He lowered his head. "He taught me to lead armies, but you taught him to lead hearts. You gave him back something I'd forgotten even existed." When he looked up again, his eyes no longer held centuries, only gratitude. "Come back," he said quietly. "Teach us both to follow." Alina smiled faintly, the kind of smile that forgives. "Only if you promise not to step on my feet this time." For the first time, the Vampire King laughed, not the polite echo of royalty, but the sound of someone finally forgiven by his own soul. Months passed. The headlines faded. The castle reopened not as a hotel for the powerful, but as a school for those who had once been told they would never move with grace again. The Aram Institute for Movement and Art Therapy, the sign read. Inside, the grand ballroom was no longer reserved for aristocrats in glass shoes. Its floor now echoed with the uneven rhythm of courage, children with braces, adults in wheelchairs, and dancers who moved to music most people never heard. Alina guided them gently, her voice calm, patient. "No one here needs permission to take a step," she said one morning. "Only a reason." At the far end of the room, Damien adjusted his cane and smiled. "Then start with mine," he said, offering his hand to a little boy uncertain on his feet. The child took it. Together, they began to move small, imperfect, beautiful. From the balcony above, Vladis Aram watched, silent. Sunlight filtered through the windows, touching his skin without pain for the first time in memory. Perhaps it wasn't sunlight at all, just the reflection of a heart finally unburdened. Alina looked up, meeting his gaze. He nodded once, a gesture of quiet reverence. She smiled and said, "Your turn, Mr. Aram." He descended the steps slowly. When the music started, a simple waltz played by Damien on the piano, the immortal king took her hand. No crowd, no rumors, just the soft hum of life continuing. They moved together across the polished floor, and with every step, the centuries between them faded. As the song ended, laughter and applause filled the hall. The chandeliers glittered once more, not in luxury, but in joy. And for anyone passing by outside, it might have looked like an ordinary dance class. But those who looked closer would have seen it, the faint shimmer of something eternal, proof that even immortals can learn to follow the rhythm of love.